everyone, this is Judith. I am a realtor here in Chicago, and today I wanted to go through using an FHA loan to purchase a multi-unit property here in Chicago. Now, I have helped many clients purchase multi-unit properties here in Chicago, either to house hack or just to purely invest in. But if you want to get into house hacking here in Chicago, using an FHA loan is probably the easiest way to get started. Number one reason why using an FHA loan is the easiest way to get started is because of the low down payment option. You only have to put 3.5% down, and on top of that, most lenders will include the rental income on some of the units to offset your mortgage, which means that you will have a higher purchasing power rather than just buying a house. Now, you want to speak with a lender to get a better idea of what your purchasing power is, and I recommend that you always speak with at least 2 lenders to get an idea of what programs they have and what you qualify for. And I usually give my clients recommendations on who to speak with. Once you speak with a lender and you determine what you get pre-approved for, then you can work backward and figure out what location you want to live in. Now, generally speaking, here in Chicago, we're split between the north side and the south side. The north side tends to have higher price points, but once you figure out what location you want to live in, then you might want to even look at the train stations that are nearby, because most people want to live by train stations. And if you're going to house hack and rent out to tenants, then you want to make your area desirable. North side has the blue line station and the south side has the orange line station. So you might want to see where your building is relative to those locations, because most people who want to rent want to live close to where their job is or have easy transportation that is nearby. And once you have a general idea of the location and where you want to live in, you can start setting up alerts, which your realtor can help you do. So whenever a building is put on the market, you get an email notification and or text. Your realtor should also be sending you properties. If you're not sure where you want to live, then maybe have 3 to 5 locations in mind. Once you have the location in mind, then you're going to want to do some research on the rents in the area. You'll want to figure out a general range of the rents in the area, and this is going to vary based on location, the number of rooms and bedrooms, and the size of the apartment. So just keep that in mind when you are looking at rents, that it is an apple-to-apple comparison to your property. The rent can be make or break, so you want to be conservative in your rent and have a general sense of the range in the area. I typically like to go with the lower price point when I'm running the numbers, because I want to be conservative and know that even if I price the rental amount at the lowest amount, that I still will cash flow on the building. You can use Zillow, or your realtor can pull some comps to get a better understanding of what the rents are in the area. If you are planning on living on the north side, where it is harder to cash flow because purchase prices tend to be higher, and while rental prices also tend to be higher, it just tends to be more difficult to cash flow. So if you want to maximize your cash flow, you might want to consider putting one of your units on Airbnb. Most of my clients that have bought on the north side have Airbnb'd one of their units. And that has allowed them to maximize cash flow, because they tend to get more doing Airbnb rather than doing long-term rentals. If you are planning on doing Airbnb, then you can use a site like AirDNA to get an idea of what the pricing is in the area. But this should be helpful to give you a better idea of pricing and how much you would cash flow. Here in Chicago, you can buy a building that has an attic or a basement that is not considered a legal unit. What we call them here in Chicago are legal non-conforming units, where you can rent out the attic or the basement, but it can be risky if someone calls the city of Chicago on you. So what most of the house hackers I know do is they live in the legal non-conforming unit that's in the basement or in the attic, and then they'll rent out the other units. For lending purposes, the legal non-conforming unit is not included for rental purposes. So if you buy a building and the attic or the basement that is legal non-conforming is being rented, you cannot include the rental income as a part of your loan. And on top of that, for appraisal purposes, the appliances like the stove and the fridge, if it's being rented out, will need to be removed prior to the appraiser scheduling their inspection. It's not a huge deal if they're not removed prior to the inspection when the appraiser shows up. But if it is red flagged or if it's called out on the report that the appraiser sends to the bank, then someone will have to go out there and get them removed and then reschedule an appointment for the appraiser to go back and ensure that they were removed. Now, if there are tenants residing in the building, you're going to want your attorney to obtain the leases for those tenants, and you're going to want to know if the tenants are month to month or if they're on a year-long lease. If they are on a year-long lease, then you're going to have to honor the lease and wait until it expires. However, if they are on a month-to-month lease, which I believe is the most preferred method, because then you can go in there and you can make changes that you want after you close. So if they're month-to-month, then you can raise the rent or you can give them a non-renewal to vacate the unit. Most house hackers that I know want to vacate the unit so they can go in there and remodel and then bring a tenant in at a higher rental amount. Especially because most of the buildings here in Chicago that are being sold need work. Most landlords that sell their multi-unit buildings here, they've had them for years, and 95% of the multi-units here in Chicago are going to need work. It's very difficult to find multi-units here in Chicago that are fully remodeled. On that note, the last thing to keep in mind is that a building that is in good condition is most suitable for an FHA loan. So if you're trying to buy a property that needs a lot of work and it's going to be a gut rehab, this loan may not be for you. An FHA loan is best suited for properties that are in good condition and don't need a whole ton of work. Certain things like chipped paint or loose railings, then the bank is going to call that out and the appraiser will go in there and inspect the building to see if there are red flags and send that back to the bank, and those things will need to be remedied before closing on the property. Now, these are things that you can negotiate with the seller, is to have them completed prior to the closing. There are some cases where the seller won't do it. In those cases, I have had some of my clients make the repairs, and if for whatever reason the deal doesn't close, then they would get that money back. And there are ways to get around that if that does happen. So overall, it's not really that difficult to obtain an FHA loan and purchase a multi-unit, but there is some research that goes behind it. You can also repeat this strategy by refinancing into a conventional loan later and then have the option of using an FHA loan again. You just can't have multiple FHA loans at once. You can only have one at a time. I hope this information was helpful to you in figuring out if this is a great option for you. I think that this is probably one of the best options to use to get into real estate investing here in Chicago. If you have any questions, please feel free to schedule a call, send me a message. Also, please don't forget, I would very much appreciate your support. And if you did like this video, please feel free to like it and or subscribe.